What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and the ending of this video is going to be crazy, but we are back with DCeased, which technically we're not supposed to release until later on this week, but I want to release it today. So what we end up doing here is, again, picking up on Earth 2, which in the world of DCeased is basically just another Earth or another world within the DC universe that is habitable for humanity. I know for all you guys out there who are DC aficionados, and some of you all have been asking this in the comments, is it Earth 2 in like an alternate universe? No, it's not the traditional alternate reality Earth 2. It's just like a world over that way that basically allows humanity to live on it, right? Because it's sustainable to human life or conducive to human life. So what we end up getting here, while all these different superheroes are basically marshaling their forces, working alongside the Green Lanterns, the Guardians of the Universe, is we end up having the arrival of the Black Racer. The Black Racer is basically an aspect of death. So much like you have in Marvel Comics where you have like Mistress Death, in DC Comics you have Death of the Endless. So it is an actual kind of cosmic entity, if you want to call it that, that represents what it means to officially die, right? Like your soul leaves your body and you go on to the afterlife. But Death of the Endless rarely ever actually interacts with anybody. Instead, what she basically does is she largely has avatars. So if we take like the Green Lanterns, for example, Nekron is the avatar for the Green Lanterns themselves. Technically, it represents death in the emotional spectrum, but nonetheless, right, it represents like the lack of life. But in effect, it is the aspect of Death of the Endless that deals with the Green Lanterns. The Black Flash deals with the Flash family, all the speedsters. The Black Racer deals with the New Gods, and everybody else just dies and their soul just goes to the afterlife. So that's kind of how these things work, right? So again, it's really more just like, imagine it as like Death of the Endless just kind of like removes parts of herself and says, you're gonna hang out with the Green Lanterns, you're gonna hang out with the Flashes, and you're gonna hang out with the New Gods. And that's basically how this works, right? So governors that basically deal with the Flash or deal with death. But the way this thing shows up is we kind of only get really Black Racer for a moment or two. Technically, its statement is that these superheroes can't kill it, which leads us into Mr. Mxyzptlk. Some guy's been commenting down in the videos and been saying that like I've been pronouncing his name wrong. Don't care. Here's the thing, right? Mxyzptlk, this guy's wildly powerful, right? He is immensely powerful. The guy's a reality warper, right? A fifth dimensional imp. There's nothing beyond his ability to achieve. That's one of the more significant things about his character, and it's why him showing up here is a pretty big deal. I mean, you do have Ares who's kind of thumping his chest, you know, in the face of Mxy, but the truth about this is Ares would never stand a chance against this guy. Nobody in this universe would, right? He's just that powerful. One of the other funny things is that the conversation that goes on is that you have the Guardians of the Universe who are directly speaking with the superheroes, and the superheroes talk about how Erebos is the one that's basically behind all of this stuff. That when DCeased initially kicked off, it really just kind of seemed like it was Darkseid basically merging the anti-life equation with the concept of death. And that gave us all these people who were infected with anti-life. The revelation that we learned recently is that Erebos is some kind of entity that exists out there that we don't really know anything about, but it's just kind of been moving from universe to universe, wiping out everything in existence by basically spreading anti-life, or by somebody doing what Darkseid did and inviting Erebos into the universe. But the way that it's talked about here, Erebos seems more like a presence or a concept or an ideology as opposed to a physical being that exists out there. Again, we don't really know anything about it, and we'll probably figure out as time goes on. But the Guardians of the Universe are aware of what Erebos is. But that's why I say it's one of the weird things, because you don't really see Superman asking a question like, are you familiar with his name, right? Or like her name. You never really see them actually given a pronoun. It's more just sort of spoken indirectly, right? Like, you know this name, that kind of a thing. So that's why I say it may or may not be like a physical, tangible being as much as an ideology. But the response of Ganthet here is that if Erebos is at the heart of this, then it changes everything. The core cannot be used to wipe away infected planets. All Green Lanterns are to guard Oa. The central power battery must be protected at all costs. Now, this is an important distinction to understand here. And the reason why is because, remember, the central power battery is the source of power for the Green Lanterns themselves, but it does this by tapping into the emotional spectrum. So if you can consider this as kind of a link, right, sort of a chain, you have the emotional spectrum, which channels the power of willpower into the Green Lantern central power battery, which in turn is channeled into the Green Lanterns. If any of the Green Lanterns were presumably corrupted by Erebos, that would allow it to enter into the emotional spectrum, and by doing so, spread through the emotional spectrum and basically corrupt it all, right? Like willpower, fear, the whole 9 yards. It would dominate all life. The thing that's not really said here by Tom Taylor, and really my assumption here, is that the emotional spectrum, as we know, exists on a multiversal level, which means every universe that exists out there can tap into the emotional spectrum. We've known that ever since War of the First Lanterns during Jeff Johns' run on the Green Lantern storyline. And so what this would mean is that if Erebos was able to access the emotional spectrum, it could actually conquer the entirety of the multiverse in one fell swoop, and that would be nuts, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, to keep this this guy from contaminating all creation across all existence in the multiverse, we have to stop him here, or at least no Green Lantern can directly come into contact with him. Now, the other part of this is Damian, right, operating as Batman, asked the question, you guys watch the universe and everything that goes on. Can you show us where the spread is, right? Show us what the front lines look like so we know where to send the most capable heroes or where we should focus our energies at. And the response of Ganthet is like, are you serious? The front lines are everywhere, man. Like, this is not some conflict where like Darkseid and his forces are going from this planet to that planet to that planet. They're not following a linear progression. That's what makes the virus just grow at a geometric rate, is they spread out like a plague and they conquer a variety of planets all at one time, right? They literally just jump from world to world and they all do it. And that's what leads to the virus spreading so fast, because what he does is he shows them a world called Balavox Vic, which is basically a world that belongs to Kilowog, but there's 16 billion people on this planet. These 16 billion people, just as an example, if they were conquered and taken over by the anti-life virus, using the power of the anti-life virus and the fact that they're basically dead, they can breathe in the vacuum of space, they would spread out to the stars, and who knows how many other worlds they would hit, right? Another world with 10 billion people on it, another world with 5 billion people, and suddenly that collective 15 billion people is combined with the 16 billion people, and you've got 31 billion people traveling around the cosmos, conquering worlds. You guys see what I'm talking about, and you see why the universe fell so fast when it came to the anti-life virus, that it's just one of those things where everything grows at an exponential rate. And so what ends up happening here is that as they're talking, you end up having Ganthet that says that they have to reform the quintessence. Of course, the quintessence being some of the most powerful beings, or really the most powerful beings throughout the entirety of the DC universe. But the problem here is that it's literally figured things out by committee. Somebody like Guy Gardner doesn't want to have to deal with that. He's like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to sit around while you guys vote by committee to figure out whether or not the universe is worth saving. We're going to get out there and we're going to fight. And ultimately, the hands of the Guardians are tied. If the Guardians were, for example, to shut down the central power battery and take away the Green Lantern's source of power, then what happens if the anti-life virus reaches Oa and the Guardians aren't there? There's no one to protect it. All the Green Lanterns fall. The central power battery is left without any form of protection, and then it's game over, right? It's just that kind of thing. So honestly, what really ends up happening here is the Green Lanterns actually leave with Kilowog when he takes off to go to his home planet in order to basically try to save his people. And then you have like Mxyzptlk and then Superman and Jonathan Kent. Now, Jonathan Kent wants to go with Superman to fight in this battle, but the response to Superman is no, like that's not going to be the case, right? He literally says, this is one planet, right? You saw the Guardian's vision. There are dozens of planets that need us, billions of lives being threatened as we speak. I wish I could take you with me, keep you near me, keep you safe, but I need you to protect our two Earths. I need you to start saving the planets the Guardians have given up on. So it's a really significant moment, and the reason why is because in recent years, especially if you go back to, what is it, the Superman, Lois and Clark comic book by Dan Jurgens, where they basically brought back the pre-Flashpoint Superman, that Jonathan Kent was a little kid. Even going into like Super Sons and different stories like that, Action Comics Rebirth, Superman Rebirth, it was largely Superman trying to protect his son. But ever since Brian Michael Bendis's trash-ass run on Superman, where basically he aged up Jonathan Kent and turned him into a teenager, which was what nobody wanted to have happen, but Bendis did it anyway because that guy just doesn't know how to write Superman, that it basically led to Superman kind of having to take a more hands-off approach to Jonathan Kent. This kind of conversation is honestly the sort of stuff that we should have been seeing during Bendis's run. It's less of Superman trying to protect his son, and it's more Superman trying to teach his son to be a more effective hero. It's what we saw during Action Comics Rebirth and Superman Rebirth, which were amazing stories. Just kind of a sidetrack here, if you ever want to know what some of the best Superman stories were in recent years, check out the videos that I did on Action Comics and Superman Rebirth. They're phenomenal. Oh my God, those stories were amazing. But the thing here is that ultimately, Jonathan Kent just kind of has to stay behind, and Superman takes off along with Kilowog and everybody else to arrive on his planet. Now, the funny thing about this is that for the people of Kilowog, they share a kind of hive mind, right? Which is to say, they're highly empathetic and they can feel the emotions of every other member on their race. And so the result of this is that when Kilowog gets there, his mind basically rejoins the collective, and all he feels is absolute terror. Now, if you're not familiar with Kilowog and the Green Lanterns, this moment's lost on you. But if you are familiar with Kilowog, it's huge. And the reason why, for those of you guys who really aren't familiar with his character, Kilowog's hardcore, man. He's like the drill instructor for the Green Lantern Corps, right? This guy, he's got it where it counts. And if you're stranded out there by yourself, Kilowog is really the guy you'd want coming to your side. The fact that he's quite literally shivering in his boots right now is a testament to the terror he feels connected with the rest of his his people and the terror they feel, which is being fed into him. But his kind of emotional state is bolstered when you get the arrival of the rest of the Green Lanterns. But this is important because remember, the Green Lanterns derive their abilities from the willpower portion of the emotional spectrum. The more willpower they have, the more capable they are. The less willpower they have, meaning their confidence begins to wane, the less capable they are. So without the other Green Lanterns showing up here, there's a better than fair chance that literally Kilowog would have just been annihilated, because at the end of the day, his willpower just wouldn't have been where it traditionally would have been because of the fear that he was feeling, right? Just the weakness of the Green Lanterns. And so what you have is, of course, you have the Green Lanterns, you've got Superman, you got all these guys who are trying to protect the people of Kilowog as best they can. Enter Supergirl. Now, the funny thing about this is that Superman has not met Supergirl yet. Remember, like during the DCeased in this story, in this universe, Supergirl never crash landed on Earth, right? She was never sent there. Instead, she was sent to the world of the New Gods. She was sent to New Genesis, where Highfather was to reside. But by the time she got there, they'd already been infected with the anti-life virus. So as soon as she got there, she was immediately subdued and taken over. She didn't stand a chance. Superman's never seen her before. And that's why he asked the question, who are you? Why are you wearing that symbol? And so the result of this is that she's able to annihilate some of the people on this world. Superman's kind of hopeless to stand by and watch, because out of nowhere comes Darkseid, and Supergirl just kind of watches on as Darkseid intends to thrash Superman. Enter Mxy, right? Mr. Mxyzptlk himself. Dude, it's so cool to see this guy, right? There's never been a time that I'm aware of in DC Comics when Mxy has fought Darkseid. I'm not aware of that at all. But we get this amazing moment here, right? Literally, he says, okay, that's enough, new god. What should I turn you into? A houseplant? A persuasive essay? And it says all Mxy had to do was think it, and Darkseid would have been undone. But he didn't have time to think. And this is one of the things to remember, right? Remember how the anti-life equation initially spread throughout Earth. Remember how it started? Smartphones, TVs, tablets. People saw it, they witnessed the equation, and in doing so, they were corrupted by it. And that's literally what Tom Taylor says, right? The virus spread in two ways, and while Mxy was no doubt confident he couldn't be harmed, which he couldn't be hurt by Darkseid, he could still see. And all it took was a corrupted mother box to show him the anti-life equation, and it's game over. Mxy is infected like that, right? He's the most powerful force under control of the anti-life equation right now. This guy could literally undo everybody with just a thought. Now, this is the way that Tom Taylor plays this, and I actually like the way that he does this. Under any normal circumstance, if Mxy was basically full of his own capabilities, right? Meaning he had his own, he had his own mind, and he was operating rationally and stuff like that, there's no limit to the kind of stuff he can do. What it looks like the anti-life equation does is it kind of reduces people down to a more primitive state. So he's not as capable as he normally would be. Now, whether or not this is something you agree with depends on, you know, on how you feel like the story should end, right? Like your own personal opinions will infer whether or not you agree with this kind of thing, which makes sense, right? I mean, everybody interprets stories in their own way. But the reality here is that instead of Mxy just snapping his fingers and everybody turns into like a bouquet of roses, he literally just like starts attacking everyone. Now, Kilowog and John Stewart respond as soon as it happens, but Mxy immediately like seizes control of him. They form a protective orb as best they can. It gets crushed. John Stewart and Kilowog die like that. Like they're just dead, gone, out of the picture. It's one of the reasons why I love Tom Taylor's writing when it comes to this stuff, man, is because at any point in time, any superhero can die. It's one of the greatest things about his writing when it comes to these alternate reality stories, because by and large, when it comes to DC, no matter what happens in a story, like Superman will always come out on top, right? The Green Lanterns will eventually always come out on top. It's always that way, right? It's just the superheroes always win. It's just how long will it take them to win, and what will they have to go through until they do. When it comes to these alternate reality stories by Tom Taylor, anything goes, right? Like there's no rules. And it's the reason why these stories that he does are so phenomenal, right? They're absolutely amazing, because basically with this world destroyed and Mxy unleashed, he immediately takes off for the world of Oa. And when he gets there, he annihilates the central power battery. And we get this amazing point where it's like, and everywhere Green Lanterns were severed from their power, exposing the core to gravity and to the vacuum of space. They're literally just suffocating out there with no oxygen whatsoever, right? It's almost like from Injustice when Kyle Rayner was pulled apart by the Sinestro Corps and dropped into the sun, right? Just like killed in space. It was pretty gruesome, right? It was pretty brutal. But the thing about this is that while the quintessence meets, you've got Hera of the Greek gods, you've got the Phantom Stranger, who even goes as far as to say, like, the Wizard Shazam is dead, Highfather is a slave to the anti-life equation. I was almost destroyed by Trigon fighting this, which I'm not aware that we ever actually got a story where the Phantom Phantom Stranger fought Trigon, and if we didn't, we need that. Maybe I'm missing something. If I am, let me know down in the comments, because maybe it's a story that we didn't cover, and if we didn't, we will fix that with a quickness. Let me know, like, let me know down in the comment section what's going on. But the bigger point that the Phantom Stranger's making is the quintessence numbers are decreasing. This universe will likely be lost to Erebos, but the response of the Specter, right, the living embodiment of God's vengeance, wrath, whatever you want to call it, like literally they kind of refer to it as both. His response is, I'm not going to let this universe fall. I'm not going to let another universe fall to Erebos. So he literally takes off, and then suddenly the power of the Green Lanterns starts to restore, right? It starts to come back. And we end up finding out the reason why is because the Specter seized control of the central power battery of the Green Lanterns, reconstituted it, and wielding the power of the Green Lanterns and the willpower of the emotional spectrum, which will likely lead to him becoming a Green Lantern, he fashions the Sword of God and then goes after Mxyzptlk. And that's the end. Thanks for watching, guys. No, this is actually the cliffhanger though, right? So in the next video, we will cover what happens next. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.